Okay. All right. We are live. Great. Okay. So good evening. Thank you for those who are watching and for those who are participating. Really excited to have you here tonight. I hereby call to order the, let's see, what is today's date? I apologize. I hereby call to order the July 8th meeting of the Annapolis Conservancy Board. And the first item we have up on our agenda is the approval of the Annapolis Conservancy Board minutes. I want to check in. Let's see, Karen or Linda, did you all have a chance to read through these? And if so, do you have any suggested edits, questions?
I do not.
I wasn't present at the last meeting, so I'll abstain.
Fair point. Okay, well, I guess, let's see, can we pass with just, I guess we can, with just two of us? I think we can do that.
You can. And
yeah.
did you want to put Karen as excused from last time on
yes.
the okay, I'll do that.
Yeah,
make that
I remember you sent me a note, Karen. Yeah, thank you so much, Tammy.
Mm-hmm.
All right. With that, can I make a motion to approve the minutes?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And Karen's abstaining. That's right. Sorry. Just keep staring at you. All right. That is great. And before we move on, I just wanted to take a moment and point this out in the public record here. I wanted to officially thank Tammy Hook for all of her hard work taking the minutes for the Annapolis Conservancy Board, at least since I've been engaged, which has been, I don't know, 4 or 5 years now. And I know way before that as well. Tammy, you have been a terrific historian, amazing, obviously, note taker, but you've been so much more than that. I think helping us to remember things we need to remember, helping certainly keep me on track, which is always necessary. And you've just always been very insightful and had wonderful things to add to our meetings. So I just want to officially put it on record to thank you, Tammy, recognize the hard work that you've done over these years and how much we will miss having your smiling face at our meetings. You're always welcome to come, and we would always love your input as well.
Thanks, Tammy.
Thank you guys so much. And I reciprocate. I will miss you guys as much as you think you might miss me.
Well, you know where to find us.
Yes, and I definitely will poke my head in and see you guys.
Oh, please do. Please do. No, thank you so much. All right. Well, moving on to our first kind of agenda item here of new business. So as many of you may have seen, the City of Annapolis, the Planning and Zoning Department, they have released draft goals, metrics, and actions for, I think, what they're calling Annapolis Ahead. So it's the update of the comprehensive plan. And I thought it would be good for us to take a look through the ones that apply to us. And I looked a little bit ahead of this meeting for some of those goals and metrics. And just see if we have any comments, make sure everything that we were interested in putting into the comp plan is there. See if there's any edits you think we might want to make, comments we might want to provide. And then if we want to, how to do that, as a joint Annapolis Conservancy Board letter, or if we just want to make individual comments. So I thought that would be a good item for us. Does that sound good to you?
Yep.
Sounds good. All right. So I'm going to go ahead. Is it okay to share my screen? If it blows up, I guess we'll know. Let's see. Now then, I just need to find the right screen. Here we are. All right. So, so the Annapolis, the Annapolis website. I can't seem to move it. Here we go. All right. Can you guys see my screen?
Yep.
All right. Awesome. So on the Annapolis website, there's some nice links to the update of the comp plan. And then from there, you can choose which section of the comp plan, which you can see over here in this left-hand bar, you want to look at. I breezed through a couple of these earlier this week, and the one that most pertains to the work of our board, the Annapolis Conservancy Board, is the land use section. So I'm going to scroll on down here, and what's kind of cool is they have 6 goals laid out. You can go through each of the goals. They have performance metrics listed in the action items. So I like the way they've laid it out here. And then of course they have some handy maps above to kind of just help get you in the right frame of mind when you're looking at some of this information. So for us, most of the work that's related to the Annapolis Conservancy Board and relates very closely to the draft actions we sent forward a while back is in Land Use Goal 6. So I wanted to throw this up for you guys and see what you think, what we have here, and get any comments or thoughts. So to start off, the goal is really tied to the work we've been doing with the Greenway Plan, the Greenway Map, excuse me, link the city together with a network formed by the city's remaining natural areas, improved open spaces, parks, and institutional uses. So I'm not quite sure what institutional means in this context. That's a question we can ask. But I wanted to start with the goal and the performance metrics and see if you guys have any comments or questions. The metrics that they want to use to evaluate success towards that goal is 1, updating the Greenway map annually, and 2, establishing at least 1 contiguous greenway within each of the city's creek watersheds by 2030. And they actually have a map. I'm just going to scroll up a little bit here for you guys. If you can see this, these are the different creek watersheds, and you can check it out. If you need to open a separate browser, but I just kind of had to look at that to think about where these contiguous greenways needed to happen to meet that metric. So what do you guys think so far? This is the main goal that really applies to a lot of what we've been talking about and the metrics.
Well, one thing I was just thinking is that how do they define a contiguous greenway? I mean, that might already exist in every watershed if they make it small enough. So it seems like that should maybe be defined a little bit better so that they could actually measure whether they've met that or not.
Yep. That's a good point. Yeah, I think, and also kind of to your point, like what does it mean to establish at least 1 contiguous greenway is a question I was just kind of popping in my head. Like, does that mean those areas are, through whatever mechanism, going to be maintained as a greenway in perpetuity? Does it mean it's just established sort of on paper that this is a key greenway? So that's a question that's come up in my head.
Yeah, or they whether it's greenway accessible to the public or not. Like, it seems like there's like a lot of ambiguity around what that whole performance metric is.
Yeah. How about Linda, Racine? Do you guys have any thoughts here?
I can't see what's above if there's a broader statement about greenways, but when I look at this goals, okay, so when I look at the goal statement, it seems like it's missing the phrase greenway. It says link together, but link the city together with a network formed, but like a network of what?
Okay.
Well, isn't it the network of the city's remaining natural areas? Isn't the second part of that sentence saying what it would be? Or is that, am I missing
think so.
something?
I think you might, yeah. I think you might be right.
I'm
But that would
sorry,
probably be
just
clear
to let you know, I figured out how to get my headphones to work.
Go ahead.
I'm on a delay for some reason. You guys are ahead of me in what I hear. So if you ask me a question, just give me a couple seconds to answer.
Okay.
Will do. Thanks, Racine.
I was just going to say, but it might be clearer a little bit, help to make it a little bit clearer, just to say, just network, that the Greenway network is made of these parts or something.
Yeah, and I think they could use a different, I get a sense for maybe what they mean by institutional uses. What comes to mind is less so the phrase institutional uses, but just maybe some of those large institutional owned partners. One thinks of universities and others that might have green space that could be connected.
That's what I was wondering too. So like schools maybe,
Mhm,
or like we talked about like the HACA property,
mhm.
excuse me, HACA Housing Authority. Yeah, that, because that, I think, yeah, I think you're right. It just, I don't know why it kind of makes me think like, ooh, what is, what does that mean? And, but maybe it's good like that. I started to think in my head, maybe if it was public, like institutional or something, like public properties or something to that effect, but that might limit it. Maybe we do want to consider, yeah, I don't know, other places. Does that bother anybody else, or is that just me? I don't know if I'd say it bothers me. It just,
Yeah, I like overall what is contained in here, but
Yeah.
don't mean to micromanage language. But
no, I think, maybe clarify. Okay, so I've got a couple of notes here. I think one, maybe trying to define those metrics a little bit more clearly in terms of what is a contiguous greenway. What's the criteria that makes up that that you have to meet to become a contiguous greenway, and then what does it mean to establish it? Maybe just get a little bit more specific there, or provide examples or something, or yeah, a little bit more detail. Does that sound good to both of you, Karen and Linda?
mhm.
Okay, and then the other here is maybe just taking another look at the goal statement and thinking about making sure that the network is more clearly defined as sort of a greenway network, and maybe thinking about the term institutional, but otherwise pretty good.
Mhm.
Okay, all right, so then I'm going to jump to action 1, and you guys can, it's kind of long, you can read it. Let me see.
I'm a little concerned that they're saying it should be managed by our board.
Yeah, that's
Managed jointly by I think that's a little bit too much responsibility for assistant advisory board. That's all volunteer time. It could say something about managed by the Department of Planning and Zoning with input from the Annapolis Conservancy Board, or something like that. I'm just worried that if it's managed jointly, then at some point it's the responsibility of doing this updating is going to fall on this board, which means then it is
might not get done.
very likely to get done because it's a volunteer board. Yeah.
Yeah, I tend to agree. And I think I really want to, I love the idea of us, being part of that process, like you're saying, or giving input and feedback. But there are parts of like a greenway plan that aren't tightly tied to our mission, I guess, or as strongly connected. And then the same concern you had, Karen, which is just capacity. I would hate for the responsibility to ensure this thing lives to be solely with our board at any point, just because we're voluntary, and that's challenging. Do those thoughts resonate with you as well, Linda, or do you have differing?
Yeah, no, I think that's right, that the plan should be I guess maintained. Do we believe that the action items below are really the implementation component?
Can you elaborate there for me? Sorry.
Well, it says an action item is design, adopt, and implement And then we have a phrase about who should manage the plan and update it. But do we know who's going to implement it? I mean, we're going to be a piece of that, correct?
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I sort of had the same question when I first read this. Like, again, what does that word manage mean? Is it just updating the plan, like, which is under the performance metric, or is it, like you say, Linda, implementing or ensuring it gets implemented or whatever? Yeah. So maybe that's sort of the question there, is to tease out. And am I on the right track with your comment, Linda?
Yep.
Okay, just again, sort of, what do you mean by manage? Is that implementing, or is it updating the plan? Okay. Okay. You guys are great. Okay. I'm sorry, I'm chewing. Just realized these headphones are probably picking all that up. Okay, update, or is it implement? Okay. All right, the only other thing that popped up for me in reading this first one, because it's very close to what we provided them, at least that first sort of phrase, is, and it's picked up a little bit later here, but sort of it mentions identifying lands that provide that list of benefits and strategies to maintain those values. But I wonder if we should also say here, a greenway plan that identifies places that could be enhanced to provide these benefits, or something to that effect. What do you guys think?
That makes sense to me.
Okay. All right, provide these benefits. All right. Add in, okay. Sorry for my pauses, just making sure I'm writing this down. Okay, so that's.
Joanna, are we able to also provide these in writing? I mean, can we kind of exchange a document
That's what
offline? Okay.
I think so. So you can submit your, let me just go ahead and open this in a new tab just so we can see what it says, but get out of there. Yeah, there's a form here where you can sort of fill out, but this is really meant, I think, for sort of individuals to comment. So I was going to check in with the city and see if it would be all right if we submitted like an Annapolis Conservancy Board letter or something like that, kind of. I don't know. What do you guys think about that?
I think that would be the easiest. I think, I was, to be able to move through these, I just highlighted and cut and paste into a Word document. And in my mind, that's how, I can offer suggestions, but
yeah, I think
that could be circulated amongst board members.
I think that's a good idea. And we could just put track changes and do sort of the comments, when we have questions like this, like need to define this more thoroughly, and if it means this or this. Yeah, and if they need us to, we could sort of write that out, but that would certainly be the easiest method, I think. Linda, you're right. What do you think, Karen?
Yeah, and I definitely, well, I think that's fine, but I definitely agree that it should come from us collectively as a board.
Yeah,
I think that that would have carry the most weight and make the most sense.
Okay. As a board, all right, awesome, that's great. All right, so I'm writing that down, and I will check in with them to sort of propose our sort of like track changes with comments document, if that would suffice. Okay. Oops. Okay. All right, so then let's see, moving on to sort of action 2. So this is about sort of aligning any new sort of infill redevelopment projects with the possibility for open space set asides and the connection of, connecting open spaces across parcels, which this specific thing we did not submit, but I like it, and personally, and there is I can't remember which, if it's maybe it's one of the other land use goals talks about really trying to promote infill and redevelopment projects. So this sort of relates to some of the other land use goals that are in this plan, I think. Any concerns or questions or suggested edits on this one?
I think it's good.
Okay, yeah, I like that one too. All right, then the next one, this was interesting. So require that public access easements be established within areas set aside for future open space or planted for required forest conservation. So
Did we do that?
you know, Karen, I don't know. And if Ashley's not on, is she? I was gonna say that would be an interesting question. I see Jackie is. Jackie, if you know the answer to that question. My question is, so I'm thinking of open space. If that means open space, like for example, when a community association has open space, dedicated open space, is that already required to have public access? I think it's not. And so is this saying that any new development that establishes open space, that has to be a requirement? Is that what that's saying?
That's the way I read it.
Wait, which one are you reading again?
This is number 3.
3, okay. Require the public access easements be established within areas set aside for future open space or plan for required. So
Yeah.
that's not worded very well. So it looks, because that definitely does not say that when there's going to be a development that there must be public access to something. Like, right now there's all that controversy about waterfront access, especially in Eastport, and like when that development Chesapeake Grove they're putting in, Benby Beach Drive, there's going to be public access to the water there. That was negotiated, and so that's really important when we're talking about waterfront access. But if we're talking about like connecting to a park, like say you're in Hillsmere and you want to cut through Hillsmere and get to quiet waters, whether there should be public access somewhere, so it's like public access for what? Easement to get to what is what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's something that, they can put that in the code that says, or put it in a plan that says that we're going to be requiring public access to get to conservation easements, to get to a park, to get to it's to get to what is my question there for that one.
Yeah, this brings up a lot of questions for me. And I'm wondering if they just meant, because I think you're right, Jackie and Linda and Karen weigh in here. When you say public access easements, that's typically an access specific easement. It's like a connection to something. It's not necessarily the thing itself is what you want to access. Am I right or wrong? I see Linda.
Yeah, you're right. It's the whole point of access is accessing something. So what are you trying to access?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of that. And I think, clarification is needed. I'm kind of speculating here, but if there's been a lot of sort of set asides and dedications, not within a residential community, but like as part of a commercial development, and they're required to set aside open space, are they trying to say that easement itself should have a public access right?
Yeah. I think, Linda, that and Joanna, everybody, that I made comments to planning and zoning, and this looks very familiar to something I would have said, because I constantly get the complaints about public access, is to say make sure that we're having public access to waterfront and to green areas. And sometimes they just take my notes and just drop them in without editing them at all.
The require is very strong, so that could be it could be a goal that where appropriate, you're endeavoring to get that.
That is where my gut is going, Linda. And I have to say, as someone who works in conservation, I feel almost guilty saying that. But I think there are instances where it really may not be appropriate to allow public access. I'm thinking of like one of the open space places behind some of the, is it the Spa Cove apartments or somewhere around there where it's really like just in someone's backyard. Like it's a tiny area and it's like, that's not really, what would you do in it? I don't know. To say it has to be required in every one of them, I could see instances where that just doesn't make a ton of sense, but I like the intent, which Jackie, I think you were getting at, right? Which is if we're gonna allow these bigger developments to come in or whatever, and they're on the water or in places where we need access, you gotta provide some public access.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I know they've done that in like Potomac. There's a Potomac Bridle and Hiking Trails Association, and every time the new development went in, they would negotiate access points for hikers, bikers, equestrians.
Oh, yeah.
So that you could, and some of these are like really, really big mansion developments, but there'll be access points where it would have like a little trail marker. And for, instance, Bay Ridge has done a lot of, they worked with the STEM program at South River, and now they're all, a lot of these trails are made during COVID by kids, but now they have marked them and they're public access trails and they have a QR code on them that you can actually put your phone on, and it shows all the Bay Ridge, like little hiking trails. And some of them are really short, but it's the same kind of idea. It's a green
space. That's great.
Yeah, it's a green space that's in Land Trust, with Scenic Rivers Land Trust, some of those spaces, and they have them actually marked out now. Right. It's the same sort of idea. If you're trying to get point to point, green space to green space, especially if there's a greenway, that would make sense.
Yeah, I mean, I agree that I think it's a noble effort, and I think it's something that's sorely lacking in the city. But I guess, with this board having gone through exercise for many years of trying to get bikeway access for certain places and not being able to do it because of liability reasons across private property and stuff, and knowing that a lot of our easements, like it's private property that just has an easement on it, it's not public property. Like I think that there are nuances that may make it more complicated than being able to just require it on everything. So I just think, just adding at the end of it, where feasible and practicable or something like that.
Yeah.
So that it shows that it's always a goal to try to get it, but it might not always be possible.
You want to say something like, in order to link green open spaces, access parks and waterfront, or maybe you don't want to take it that far. Throwing it out there.
I mean, the problem is with connecting existing green space at the moment is that most of it's not publicly accessible at the moment. So again, it kind of goes back to what you were saying, Jackie, about like where what's the access to, because it wouldn't make sense to require access to a forest conservation easement that's not public property. That's just an easement on somebody's private, HOA's private property or something, without having an easement already established with that for, public access on that HOA's property. So
I think you would be looking at like new development, so water access or connections to parks, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
To bike trails, if there's something blocking access to a bike trail.
Yeah. Well, the action says specifically open space or forest conservation or areas planted.
I know. I don't know. I think they may have taken two separate comments of mine and melded them.
Yeah.
Which they've done before.
I was wondering about that, and I'm not the most knowledgeable in the Forest Conservation Act and how all that happens and where it happens, but my understanding is that could be someone's private backyard. Is that correct? When it says for required forest conservation?
It could be in a development because they sometimes have to put aside an area for forest conservation mitigation or retain forest for forest conservation purposes so they don't trigger mitigation. So it could be private property. So that's why I think they took two ideas because it doesn't make sense.
Okay.
We can't always, legally can't require it in some instances.
That's what I was wondering. Okay. All right. So basically this one, we just need to dig in a fair bit more on this one and think
You
through.
just tack on the end of it as where feasible and practicable. I think that would take care of it.
I'm wondering if there's also a way, and we don't need to figure this out today, but there's a way to make it, I'm trying to think of like the right legal language, but so you sort of initially start off when you're going through a development or something with somebody, like the assumption is that there will be public access in any open space. Like that is the initial assumption for planners and for those that are doing this. And then it's sort of like the burden of proof to say why that's inappropriate is on, whoever, the developers or something, just so it's not like, I always get nervous when just to say we're appropriate, unless there's somebody that's like really watching that to make sure they are considering if it's appropriate. Like it's not, do you know what I mean? And I may be digging into the weeds too much here, but.
Yeah, I think that's a good point.
Okay. No, we could chat with them about that. Okay. All right. So let's jump into this next one here. Action 4. For street tree planting. So recognizing the benefits of street tree planting, design certain streets to be part of the Greenway plan and elevate the importance of street tree planting and coordinating landscape along properties. When I first read through this, I haven't thought through it a ton, but my initial impression was it sounds like a good idea. The thought of creating sort of green streets through the city that would maybe provide somewhat of a connection to neighboring green spaces, and also good for these other benefits too, right? So I
don't have a problem with it. I think it's fine.
All right. I'll move us ahead here unless any other comments for 4. Let's jump into 5. All right. So using the city's Forest Conservation Act, excuse me, well, I guess that's right, but use the city's forest conservation requirements to direct conservation and afforestation in ways that build larger networks of connected forests.
Okay, again, I think Eric took my idea of, trying to keep connected forests and large stands of forests as much as possible when in doing the site design, and kind of mushed it with forest conservation requirements. I think, when I first read this, I didn't see that, but now I see that he took that idea and kind of mashed it. But because forest conservation requirements you do on site, and when you can't, you do them elsewhere. So he may have been thinking that we direct mitigation areas where you can't mitigate on site to areas where it would build larger networks of connected forests. Now, I can get behind that idea. You kind of push developers towards areas to replant where it's going to build on a forest. I'm also very much behind the idea of, site design that retains large stands of trees, especially where they would connect to an existing forest.
Yeah, I mean, those are two kind of in some ways separate ideas there, Jackie, and I like them both. I like the site design.
Yeah, I don't know much about the code section. One would think that a way to do that is to give extra points, or however they're measured, their mitigation is measured, or but
Well, they're always asking us for, where should we mitigate and where maybe we can have some preferential sites the city
Gotcha.
forester can identify
Yeah.
that would, create or add on to existing forest
Mhm.
or habitat corridors.
Course. Yep.
But it's up to our landscape design architects and planning and zoning to tell them where they want to keep trees. And so I don't want to give them extra points for anything they have to do anyway. I
Gotcha.
just think it's better site design to try to group the large stands together and say it backs up to an existing forest. Well, let's, if we have to group trees, let's do it in that part of the lot or site.
So are these two separate things here that we want, two separate pieces really? That one, we want to direct mitigation to places where it will ideally build these connected forests, build all
Yes.
this, and then sort of separately that in site design, again, the emphasis or the first attempt should always be to group and keep large stands of trees contiguous. That should be I don't know if I'm doing this right.
From the staff perspective, yes and yes.
Yeah, I guess that's clear. If you actually read it, it has the two components. So direct conservation, you could take that to mean on-site conservation. That's what you're doing. And then the afforestation is off-site mitigation. But
so maybe, go ahead, Linda.
It's clear if you do if you want staff to know, it's really at the site design level, then you might as well say it, I guess.
I think so too. So I think the more general it gets, the less impact it has.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. So maybe our comment here could just be reword in a way that makes it clear that both of these components are built into this action here, and that it's at the site design level and at mitigation. Okay. Does that make sense to everybody? Excuse me. Okay. All right. We are blowing through it. All right. Action 6. Explore opportunities to plant trees on HACA property and on county property within the city limits. I would take this one step forward, but maybe that's meant for one of these other action items. I just think yes on the planting trees, and I would say also public access or but maybe that's taking it a step too far.
Just so you guys know, I have both Brian Adams and the city forester and I have talked to HACA, and they are very happy to have us talk to them about planting trees on their properties.
Oh, great.
Yeah. So it's not just explore opportunities. I guess explore opportunities would be to take advantage of those opportunities.
Yeah.
I think it's still worded correctly.
Okay. But I like that. Yeah, it's already sort of moving. That's awesome. I'm glad to hear that. Does this look good to you guys? Yeah.
Seems fine to me.
Okay. Oop. All right, so 7. Okay, this one again, I may need some help to make sure I'm understanding this correctly, but amending the zoning ordinance and the zoning map to create and apply environmental enhancement areas that are guided by the future land use map. These are parcels that are already offering ecological benefits or could be improved to do so, but not appropriate to serve as parkland. So my question, I guess, is what does that mean when you create and apply an environmental enhancement area?
I think Eric has since, and he may not have reflected it in the actions, but I think he's calling these now environmentally sensitive areas.
Mm. Do you know what that?
It sounds like they want to make a zoning for environmental,
like an overlay.
I'm not sure exactly. I'm not sure if he's trying to make a separate zoning category or an overlay, but I think he's trying to identify areas that as he says here, offer ecological benefits or could be improved too. Where they're not active parkland. So it
Yeah,
could even be like a green area, that like a cemetery, or just an area along, like they're talking about that and Poplar Avenue extension, where there's some large green areas, but they're not like there's erosion there or something like that, and they could be more tree planting along, like I've suggested, tree planting along some of those bike paths and stormwater controls. They can be improved, and they could afford some eco benefits. They could even be, taking out the grass and just doing it with, pollinator plants or other native species, rather than having grassy swales.
So this is like places for restoration, like places that would be ideal for restoration. Is that what you're thinking?
Well, not so much restoration. They could just be enhanced too. Like a lot of, what I'm thinking, a lot of those are along the proposed bike trail areas.
Okay, it's like beautiful.
So it's anything that's not a park is what they're thinking, but that could provide environmental benefits.
So I guess what I'm wondering,
the way I read this, it sounds like they want to make it so that it can't be developed.
yeah,
Like it's a zoning.
that's what
It
I would
can't be
assume.
developed.
Yeah, well, that's the idea too. They want to improve them, protect them, and preserve them.
Okay, that's what I was curious. If it's in the zoning ordinance, that's what I was wondering.
Some of them you wouldn't develop anyway. Like I'm talking about, there's some 16-foot swaths along some of the proposed bike trails. No one's going to develop that, obviously.
Like
but
the ravines.
It from being widened into a wider road or carved out for additional parking, by calling it an environmental enhancement area, or however what he's calling it now.
So maybe, okay, so that's what I thought it meant, that if it's labeled as an environmental enhancement area and that gets approved, that means, yeah, it can't be developed, and it needs to remain in some kind of ecological beneficial purpose or form. And maybe that's just a question that I'm happy to ask them that. We can put that in the comments. Like, does this mean this? Does that make sense to you guys?
Mhm.
Okay. All right.
I would also add that it should be guided not only by the future land use map, but also by the Greenway plan.
Yeah, that's what I thought so too. Okay. Sorry. Don't know why I just got offended by that. It's not. Okay, let's see. Here we go. So then, all right, that's good. Next one, enact an agreement with the county that establishes, right. So this is our agreement with the county that we can use our share of the program open space funds. So my question here was, I did check in with Ashley before the meeting, Ashley Leonard, and asked her what the status was of the MOU that they've been sending back and forth between the county and the city. And I believe she said it is still, hold on, I've got to print it out here somewhere so I can remember. It's still with the county's Parks and Rec department. She's going to send a nudge to them. So I share that with you because I'm wondering, and it probably makes sense just to go ahead and include it in here. And if it gets done before the comp plan is finalized, that's not a huge deal. But that was my immediate thought, was this is kind of already in the works. But if it's in here and it doesn't get done, it helps us, give us teeth to, I think, keep pushing with whatever administration comes through.
I have a question about the last sentence. Is there a reason that we should put some parameters on the city? I mean, aren't there parameters governed by, state programmatic rules? Why do we have to agree to specific uses with the county? Do they have a say?
I don't think so. I don't know. Jackie?
I mean, the whole point of the MOU was so that they wouldn't have a say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think it's just I think it's a misspeaking, because I think probably what they mean is less the specific use of the fund, but like the specific breakdown of how the funds are accumulated and distributed, which is already in the MOU. I just assume that it's probably misspeak.
Gotcha.
So say that again, Karen, what you think it should say, or should. allude to?
Well, it could just say should detail the, I don't know, you could probably just strike that whole sentence because it's already, the language is already in the MOU, but that's being circulated. But that MOU details how the funds should be accumulated and distributed between the county and the city.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think that, okay. Okay. Okay.
Well, I think this is, the MOU is mostly directed at the county. We have the right to a certain amount of that money, but there's been a practice where they sort of feel like they don't have to dole it out. So that's why the city really wanted to have it in writing, so everyone understands perfectly and clearly what the process is and what the expectations are with regard to program open space money.
Yep.
Yeah. No, I think that's right. I think you guys are all probably right. That's probably what that last sentence there is sort of alluding to, just how that works out. Because Linda, I agree. I feel like that's already pretty well, I assume, maybe I shouldn't assume, but that's sort of written out in POS language, right? Like, yeah, you can only use these monies for these purposes.
Yeah, unless it establishes that the county has oversight on the use of the funds within, like the cities and towns within the county. I don't know why we would say that.
That's it. Yeah. I don't know.
I think
Okay.
either they could just strike that sentence, or they could change uses to distribution.
Yeah.
Specific, like detail the specific distributions or
Okay.
distribution of the funds.
Yeah.
I like that. It's even easier. Okay, perfect. Nice work, you guys. Okay. And then this last one is, again, very similar to one that we submitted to them. Wanting to improve coordination between the city departments and the boards and commissions that work on environmental protection, like us. Excuse me, and probably also the Annapolis Environmental Commission, I would imagine. But this is something we've talked about before that we've wanted to maybe move towards, but just ensuring that properties that are being reviewed for development or permitting are, it's, again, thought about in this fuller context, what's next door to it? Are there opportunities for easements or ways to connect to adjacent open space trails, that kind of thing? I think, I don't know how the mechanism where these conversations are happening with the Annapolis Environmental Commission is. I know they do sometimes comment on development. I don't know if they're just keeping track or if they have a city staff member that's sort of letting them know when there's something that relates to something they're working on.
So Sally Nash, Director of Planning and Zoning, provides them every month with the same report that she provides to the standing committee, the environmental committee. She provides them with that same monthly chart. It's an Excel spreadsheet that shows where developments are in the process. If they had a forest conservation stand delineation, is it required or not? Has it been permitted? Or is it going to the Board of Appeals? It makes perfect sense for this board to see that same chart from Sally every month.
I like that. What do you guys think, Karen and Linda? Be nice to get that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be useful. Just of course, like the Environmental Commission has other interests in terms of like stormwater.
They look at lead design and they look at solar panels and is it EV ready and all kinds of things like that, permeable pavers. They have other interests that you guys have, definitely have something to say that's a little bit different. And
I guess my point is that most probable, I would, it seems like most of the development that comes through the city these days is redevelopment. So probably, at least half of what would be on her list wouldn't be relevant to us because it's just a redevelopment. So it's more relevant to the Environmental Commission because they are looking at all those other environmental factors. But it doesn't hurt to look at it, and make sure that nothing gets missed.
That's what
Right,
Yeah,
and that's good
I like
to know,
that.
because Racine is your staff liaison, and Racine is primary person to review those development proposals and put her comments and track it. And she can look at them also with the lens that, the kinds of issues
Nice.
that the board is tasked with, and, bring them to your attention for any comments you want to submit on them.
Oh, that sounds good. And how often does that chart come out? Is that a monthly thing?
Monthly, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that might be good. And this could be something that we, talk about as a board. Is that sort of a role that either, or maybe Racine could inform us, or is that a role that one of our board members wants to take on, that they sort of review that every month or whatever, and let us know if there are ones that relate to properties we've identified, or things in the agreement plan, or things to bring up to the full board.
That's how they do it on the Environmental Commission. They have someone kind of tasked with the review.
Or one thing we used to do is this is like way back when the city had an what do you call them, ombudsman?
I can't pronounce that one either.
I can't say that word, but who was like, coordinating boards and commissions, but they used to give us the meeting minutes for all the other environmental boards, so that like we got kind of like the printout of not only our board's minutes, but like the Environmental Commission, the Maritime Advisory Board.
Karen,
so,
you may want to check your charter, because the Environmental Commission, I had them brought to their attention that I looked at their charter, and they are in their charter. It says they're supposed to get the minutes from the Maritime Advisory Board. I think there was another one and they weren't getting them. So they're now, and also those boards and commissions that are identified in the commission's charter, they're supposed to be getting their minutes, as well as be advised of anything that is environmental that they should be looking at. Like, for if the port wardens are looking at in environmental, they're supposed to notify the commission. So you might want to look at your charter.
But I guess like where I was going with that is that if like we could just distribute the list the same way we used to with the meeting minutes for the other boards. So it was just like sent out sort of the same time the agenda was sent out, so people kind of looked it over ahead of time, and then if there were any questions, it could be raised at the meeting, so it didn't fall on one person. but if we have somebody who's interested in taking that role on, then that would be great. But
I think because when they started posting them, Karen, that they got away from sending them directly to the chair.
That makes sense.
Yeah. I think that's why they stopped, and back then I was the one that was actually providing the minutes to you guys, and we were doing them on paper, then we went electronic, and then we went posting. So I think that's maybe, if you're going to do it, you probably want to have them check the website for the posting.
Yeah.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Thanks, Tammy. I forgot about that.
Yeah. I think that's a great idea. And it relates to something I'm going to show you in a second here, another action item that's in a different part of the comp plan, but where it was to strengthen connections between our board and the Park and Recreation Advisory Board. So yeah, I think, potentially looking at Annapolis Environmental Commission, the Park and Rec Board, maybe, one of the others you mentioned there, probably not a bad idea for us to be doing things like that, and just making some stronger connections across those boards in some fashion. All right, so does this last one sound good to everybody? Yeah, all right, I'm gonna jump ahead then, or not jump ahead, but jump to another section. So I haven't read through every one of these goals and every one of the different sections of the comp plan. I sort of skimmed through to find areas that related to the actions that we had submitted and goals we had submitted. So the other place that relates to some of the comments that we had is in community facilities. And I have that up here. And let me make sure I know what I'm looking at here. So yeah, I think in this first goal is where, yeah, there's a number of actions that relate to our work, and then also in the second goal. So in this first one, the goal for community facilities, merge the park and recreation system with its evolving network of conservation areas and trails. So similar, has some of the same language actually that's in the land use goal we just looked at, related to designing, adopting, and implementing the Greenway Plan. You'll see that's in action 3. And that the performance metric is publication of a comprehensive park system map, which is different from the Greenway map, but obviously related. But the one thing I wanted to point out to you here is the first action item, because it lists us, which is to revise the mission of the Annapolis Conservancy Board to include regular coordination with the Department of Recreation and Parks. And I wanted to, get your thoughts on that.
I don't know that we want to revise our mission.
I agree.
I'm glad you've caught this, because I didn't notice this earlier when I was looking through the document.
No, like I said, I should probably look through more of it than I have, but yeah, I agree. I don't think it makes sense to revise the mission. I don't know if it's just that, ensure that the Annapolis Conservancy Board coordinates regularly with the Department of Recreation. And this is Department of Recreation and Parks. Excuse me, I mentioned before the Parks and Rec Advisory Board. So those are different. But I agree. I don't think it makes sense to revise the mission. I'm not exactly sure if it's, and I would need to read through the code that established the Annapolis Conservancy Board to see if it mentions anything like this in there. I haven't looked through it in a long time, because it could be added to the code that should be one of the things the board does. Or again, just something like ensure that there's communication across. Go ahead, see both you guys.
Yeah, I don't think it should be a mission thing. I mean, it seems like it should be more of an, I don't know, it seems like it should be something embedded, maybe. Well, I guess they're trying to keep it out of action 3. So action 3 matches word for word what's under land use goal 6, but it seems more like that there should just be coordination between, or well, it wouldn't even be, I don't even think it needs to be regular coordination. Most of what Department of Rec and Parks does is active recreation, which we have nothing to do with. And I don't think we want to change our mission to start to include active recreation, because there's already a board, an advisory board for recreation. So I don't know. I might just strike that whole, I might suggest that they strike that whole action altogether, or otherwise somehow change it to just somehow consult with the Annapolis Conservancy Board for trail connections or something, like make it specific to trail connections, because that's the only thing I think really we would need to
That's what comes to my mind. I'm kind of on the same page as you. As I think of, okay, if the Conservancy Board is working on certain elements that are public access in the future, maybe it would be interesting to know, like Department of Rec and Parks and their plan, and do they have goals related to that? And are we playing a role in meeting one of those goals through our public access efforts?
The other area where you guys have an interest in parks is where you want to put a conservation easement on a park, such as Trexton Park, so that it cannot be rebuilt or sold off in the future.
Yeah.
That's kind of a one-time thing. I don't see that as being, well, I know, I mean, I guess it's sort of similar to MOU, which is a one-time thing that's in here. So maybe it's not a big deal to have it in, but it's just like, once we put those easements on, I guess the city could always add parks, but I would assume that then that would be a kind of a standing policy and we wouldn't be involved as much.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think the other, and this might have been what you were getting to, Linda, I think of the other potential situation where it would be good to have really close coordination is if we are pursuing the creation of a new easement on a property that could provide public access or could meet, right, their goals for parks or something to that effect, and making sure that there's very strong coordination early on, as the terms of an easement are worked out. So I do. Yeah. I think it seems like for a lot of us, this just comes off as like a little strong and maybe like too much, at least at first read. I think you're right. I don't like revise the mission because I don't think that's not a mission thing. But maybe like improve coordination across, or yeah. And I guess when I read regular coordination, I mean, that makes it sound like it's really often, but that regular could just be once a year or something, or, like in January at the start of a year when we're talking about our goals, or
that's true,
something like that.
Yeah. I guess they would need our input for action too, where it says their map would include information on conservation areas. So
does it sound good? So the comment is more sort of, take out the mission business and just like ensure the Conservancy Board, or create a mechanism for the Conservancy Board to regularly coordinate with the Department of Recreation and Parks. Something like that.
I think that would be fine with me.
Yeah, I don't know. Okay. All right. And then I think those are the main things here that's really tied closely to our board. The other place was in the second community facilities goal. This relates to, I don't know if you guys remember, but a couple of the goals and strategies we had submitted related to ensuring that all communities have access to a public open space or green space, for passive recreation. And we suggested it might be good to have a standard, all communities are within a 10-minute walk or something to that effect. And so this kind of meets, I think, that idea here. In the performance metrics, they want to see that all residents are within a 1/4 mile of a mini park, a 1/2 mile from a neighborhood park, and a mile from a community playfield.
Yeah, that's good. I like that.
Mm-hmm.
I like it too. Yeah, I was excited. Okay. All right, any additions or anything? We're good, okay. So those are the ones that I found that really, I thought were really strongly connected to things we suggested. We had suggested a couple of strategies that aren't listed specifically in here, but they, when reading through them again, it may be just at a level that's not really necessary as an action. But we had suggested to evaluate all the city, county, and state-owned properties for their potential to provide open space, natural areas, connections, and identify top priorities for enhancement. And that may fall under some of the other actions that were in the land use plan.
Yeah, I feel like that was in the other goal section.
So I think that might just be sort of like, strategies under that action or something that would come into play. Does that sound good to you guys? Okay, that was the only one I caught that I didn't see, but it did seem to be a little bit too specific. Yeah, that's what I have. Have you guys, or Racine, Jackie, have you seen anything else that in the comp plan that we should be taking a closer look at besides the one we've talked about here?
I don't. I didn't see anything else. I think you've got
Okay.
it. Racine, are
That's
you on the
good.
call?
She is. She has a weird delay
Oh, okay.
and she's shaking her head. So
I am on the call. I'm sorry.
no, keep going, Racine. If you.
Oh, okay. I am on the call, but I am on a delay. I haven't had a chance yet to really review the comp plan, so I don't really have any feedback as far as how it it associates with the Conservancy Board. But I will take a look, and if I do have any comments, I'll let you know.
Thank you, Racine. I appreciate that. That is quite the delay. Okay, great. I think this is good then for the comp plan pieces. This is really wonderful, by the way. Thank you guys for walking through this. Look at that. That's awesome. So I really appreciate you all walking through this. And yeah, this was great. So thank you for this. I also just want to say to the city staff who've been working on this, I really like the way it's laid out on this website. It was really easy to sort of work through. It wasn't so much text that I felt like, dear Lord, how am I ever going to get through this? So I really appreciate the layout and the amount of information that's been provided here. And it may seem that we're like attacking some of these things, but I think on the whole, I was really excited to see that a lot of the suggestions we made were incorporated into these draft goals and metrics and actions. So just wanted to point that out and say thank you to city staff for all their work on this. And I think we're happy to keep working with folks as they make edits. Question for you, Jackie. The last thing I saw on this website was that they would be taking comments through early August. Do you have any additional detail on a deadline for comments?
I would take that as your deadline through early August, meaning
Early August.
First or second week of August. I know that Eric is trying to take all the comments. That's why he wants them in early August and have a revised set of goals and metrics for September. And then once that gets through, like what the other, I guess through city council, then he will then start drafting.
Okay. Okay. All right. So no set actual, date, but just we'll stick to early August, those first couple of weeks.
Maybe have Racine can check with Eric, so she can find you a date for both the Environmental Commission and for the Conservancy Board. What date he's, drop dead date for you guys.
Yeah. All right. Drop dead date. Okay.
Hey, Joanna, Tom Lip.
Oh, hey, Tom.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hi. No, I've been there. I just haven't been smart enough in order to find a way to butt that through to get it to you. Yeah, you had some good discussion. You're right. It was good to see some of the points that we had discussed, kicked in a little bit earlier, and like we mentioned, earlier on the change, or not necessarily needing the change on the mission. I agree. I think keeping that as generic as possible. I jotted some things down as you were talking, but you're not alone out there. I agree with you on your thought process. I just wanted to take this time to chime in.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, no worries. And yeah, feel free if you want to email those comments around to the group, and same to you, Linda and Karen. If there are other comments, if you happen to be perusing the comp plan over the weekend and want to share additional comments you have, feel free to do that. Let's see. The other thing I wanted to show you guys, which was also put out as part of this comp plan update process, are these case studies. Let me go back to the main page. And did I miss somebody? Did someone just speak up?
I was just saying, oh yeah, I thought this was interesting.
Oh yeah,
Way to
sorry.
Generate some discussion.
Yeah, I thought so too. So they provide these sort of 4 case studies, which are 4 sort of properties, 4 locations that they thought were likely to be redeveloped in the next 10 to 20 years. So within the time frame of this comp plan that's being written right now, they felt like they had underperforming land uses. There's an opportunity to improve them, to complement adjacent communities, streetscape infrastructure, and there was currently a high percentage of impervious coverage, and it could be improvements made for environmental performance, as well as meeting more community needs. So yeah, sort of 4 locations that they think are sort of ripe for improvement and redevelopment within the time frame of this comp plan, the next 10 to 20 years. And it does highlight, these are completely speculative, but based on an understanding of existing conditions and things they've heard in context. Yeah, I thought this was an interesting thing to do. And my main goal here today was I just wanted to point out, I just looked really quickly at a couple of these, and I'll pull up the Bay Ridge case study. You know, they asked sort of what might the future hold for this area, right? And so for you guys here, so this is Forest Drive going into Bay Ridge Road. This is that giant shopping center parking lot. It's across from, I think, a CVS and a Starbucks, and actually across from one of the newer easements that we have. I am blanking on the name of it, but it is a new assisted living or senior living property that in the back of it has a conservation easement. I wanted to point this out to us because I think this is really interesting that they highlighted these 4 places. And, you know, to me, it makes me think of how do we ensure that our board is sort of part of these conversations, or that we're paying attention to the right things to be able to make comments on these potential opportunities as they move forward. Because, and I'll bring up part of our, this is the properties you're seeing are the ones that have been suggested so far for our Greenway map. And I wanted to zoom in. This is that same area, right? The Bay Ridge Shopping Center with the giant. And as you can see, a couple places have been suggested right adjacent to the shopping center as potential places to either protect or that could be enhanced for all those great benefits, right? Ecological, recreation, scenic, all those good things. And as you guys also know, I don't think it's going to pop up when I hit it, but there is actually, there's an easement here and there is a conservation easement. I think it's like kind of right here that exists, again, behind that senior living facility that's new. So I just point this out because when I looked at the examples, they had a lot of opportunity that related very closely to a lot of the suggestions that people have been making for green space and that were going to be highlighted in the Greenway plan.
So Joanne, I just want to point out something to you before you guys start discussing this. You know, next, and kind of, you can see in front of the senior living center, to the kind of, it's like next to the Starbucks, moving over, there were 2 like kind of rundown houses and an old store building. And the city owns those properties.
Oh.
And this is Rob Savage's ward, who's my environmental friend, but in this respect, he knows I disagree with him. He has proposed that a Lidl store go in there. You know, there's a Lidl shopping center, grocery stores, like a kind of like a low-cost grocery store up in the Pearl Center area right now. So I said to him, I really don't think we need another one down there, and we already have Giant, and we want to encourage people to utilize the Giant shopping center. The Safeway is right down the street, and I know that's a priority of the cities to kind of revitalize interest in that Safeway shopping center as well, which is kind of hurting. So to putting in another competitor really doesn't help us. And also, it's potential green space. He has not replied to me on this point, but just raising that for your own consideration, that's what's being proposed there. That's what Rob is advocating for in his ward.
Seems like a tough place for traffic to get in and out of too. So might as well make it green space.
Yeah. Yeah, and so what you're pointing out, Jackie, I think is my is my question here, but I definitely want to see Karen and Linda, just, what's coming up in your minds as sort of we're just walking through these case studies that have been identified and potential connections with stuff that we're looking at. My question is, so yeah, where are the conversations happening, I guess, related to this, and how can we best, I don't know if the word is influence or just provide input or feedback, the things that we're talking about here. So I'll leave it at that. But yeah, Linda, Karen, any?
Well, I don't know, how much it's within the purview of the board, but I mean, just from a personal perspective, it got me thinking, because I actually use that giant.
Yep, me too.
And it is so typical suburban shopping parking lot. And I thought, gosh, look at where it is. That could be a commons. That location could be a great, programmed center of activity in the future. So that just got me thinking a little bit about how differently, if down the road, if the owners, had an idea to sort of remake that.
So and that's exactly where I was thinking with it. And but I think that if you were going to make suggestions, it'd be appropriate to send those suggestions to planning and zoning, to the mayor, and copy the mayor and the city manager and all the alder persons, especially Mr. Savage, to weigh in on, an opportunity here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's probably, if we wanted to sort of sit down and make comments about this and suggestions, that would be where we would send it to. We would sort of write it up, submit it to planning and zoning and the city alderman. That's sort of that's the process we should go through.
Yes, and include the city manager and the mayor. You could address it to the mayor and the director of planning and zoning, or or to the mayor and just copy Sally Nash, all the aldermen and women, and the city manager on it.
Yeah, what do you guys think that are on here? So Tom, Linda, Karen, is that something maybe for us to work towards as a board, is to take a look at maybe these specific case studies that are a good use of our kind of time and energies here to look at these and really dig in, and it might be a way to start to sort of. How serious
are they? I kind of thought that this was just like an example of what they would do if they were planning to develop a site, and not that they were actually planning to redevelop it just yet. But
no, they're seriously contemplating what to do with this site. And as I said, he's included it in his campaign and all his newsletters for the last, I want to say, close to 6 months now. So
that's what I wondered. I know obviously there aren't like set plans for redevelopment as it states on the website here, but I just wondered, are things happening with these 4 sites that it might be advantageous for us to dig in and provide comments and think about these as good examples of how to use the Greenway, mapping we've been doing. I don't know. So that you kind of answered my question there, I think, Jackie. Yeah, Linda or Tom, do you guys have questions?
Well, I would love to be able to consider, actually having this be something we could sink our teeth into. I mean, we'd have a whole lot more credibility if we didn't approach it on the side. I keep seeing even if we do come up with a great idea, being patted on the head and said, go back in your corner, please. No one asked you. I mean, if we want to take it and work one separately, for ourselves and see whether what we've come up with is a viable answer, and that our city reps, also concur, I think that would be fine. But otherwise, I think we're looking at a lot of futility, and I just hate to do that before we, would get involved. For example, if that way we would be perceived as taking sides in an election if one of the candidates voted in one direction and another didn't. And again, we are city volunteers subject to the city. So I think, trying to do that without necessarily some direct going forward, I think would be different. If the current mayor would show up at the meeting and say, hey, this sounds like a great idea, why don't we do that? Then we at least have high cover in order to, to press on and, come forward with something. But as opposed to, doing it on our own, great idea, just a little premature, I think. Yeah, it's my two cents.
What I was suggesting was just to do a simple letter, is like in your role as the Conservancy Board, you identify properties that could be used for green space and conservation, and that you're aware that these are city properties with different ideas floating around. It can be very, very simple, just something like that, just highlighting, unfortunately, the city does not always think about, hey, this could be a park or this could be green space. They automatically jump to development every time they look at a site. So I just see that
true.
Your role is to identify for the city potential green spaces and conservation spaces, and not taking sides in an election or anything like that, but just this is one of your duties.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's just something, we use and this, that I do think that this is valid here, but that we, took a look at those case studies and used them as an opportunity to sort of, think through how the Greenway map we've been developing could be used and could help us kind of think through opportunities. And here's what we came up with, and, would love to continue this conversation with you guys or something to that effect, I think.
And the reason why I was saying notify the aldermen and women, they're always complaining that they don't know what's going on with boards and other boards and commissions.
Yeah.
And, that they're not notified. So I tend to notify them about everything possible now, so they can't. They're not aware. Told them.
Not a bad idea if you want to, if you want to proceed. I mean, it is being proactive. It is going back and giving the aldermen and alderwomen what what it is that is out there and seeing whether any of them want to want to bite on it. But I think is a brainstorming session, something that potentially could flow through would be great. I think spending an awful lot of time is where you're going to run into some challenges. But heck, we've tilted at windmills before. I'm game to tilt at one more.
All right, so that's one. And I think to I just wanted to highlight this line here, Linda. You had mentioned is there a way to use these kinds of properties more as a commons and for other purposes? And it sort of points out in the language here that the parking lot is larger than is typically needed for the shops that are existing there. So I don't know why, but I felt like I wanted to highlight that.
I know that I just want to tell you guys, I know that planning and zoning is looking at that parking lot to potentially use for some green space. Very seriously. That
So
giant lot, because it's an underutilized lot. It's never full, and they realize they don't need all the parking spaces there.
So it sounds like it probably would be good to have a little conversation. Maybe, throw some thoughts into the mix. This is good intel. Thank you very much. Let's see. And I don't know if we necessarily need to go through all four of these right now. Unless you guys want to. Yeah, the other one that came up for me is a property that's been talked about for a long time, but is sort of, I think this is the redevelopment of the, I guess the existing and soon to no longer be public works facility or public works, whatever this is called. Public works facility. These are these two properties here that are near the Bates School on Spa Road.
Now, the last time we checked in with Sally Nash about this, she said there are no preconceived plans at this time. They are open to all suggestions.
Yeah, so that, that's another interesting one. It obviously backs right up here at kind of the headwaters area of one of these little creeks. I probably shouldn't do this. I'm probably going to get myself lost, but I think, let's see, Spa, here we go. I can do this. Spa Road, and there's Bates. So I think it's these two properties. Am I right? Somewhere in here.
Yep, that's right.
Right here. Okay, yeah. So, again, kind of backing up right into this little creek, the headwaters of Spa Creek here.
We have an easement right there too.
If that pops up. Yeah, there you go. It's sort of the ones that are coming on and off are the easements, although I think there might need to be some adjustments here, but yeah, so that's another interesting one. I know it's one that lots of people have talked about for a long time is what's going to happen with this facility and what are the opportunities there. So
as far as space goes, I just want to say, Joanna, this had been looked at as a development site. But the developer walked away when he realized the type of remediation that will be required for residential. So it could be a great brownfields kind of park space, because no one wants to remediate it to the point where you could develop it for residential.
Yeah.
At this point.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. That's interesting. Okay. Yeah. So, yeah, so I wanted to point this out because I saw these on the website. I thought it was really interesting that they did this. I think it's really cool, again, of the city to do this, to use these to sort of ground the thinking for the comp plan. And I think, again, it was helpful for me to start to kind of ground what we're thinking of with the Greenway map and, our role and all that kind of stuff. It may or may not be moving forward, but it just kind of got my head going, and I thought it might be interesting to see what you guys are thinking about it as well. So it sounds like, I think I'm hearing from you guys, yes, there's some interest in maybe looking at some of these case studies and providing some comments from the board. Is that safe to say? Am I?
Sure, but I suggest we do it at a different meeting.
Oh yeah, no, not today. No. Yeah, no, sorry. Didn't mean to scare you. Yep. But is that generally where everyone is feeling like could be a good exercise to do that? Am I off base?
Yeah, I think it's a good exercise.
Okay, you guys can say no if you don't like it. I was just trying to get a sense for where to go next. All right, well, I'm going to write that down as something to come back to for us. So that's what I had related to the comp plan to show you guys. I will give you a very quick update on the Greenway map right now and kind of what we've done recently and what some of the next steps could be. I don't want to keep you guys too long. Okay, making sure I've got my notes correct here. Okay, so Linda and Karen and I met fairly recently to take a look at all the parcels that had been submitted as potential things to include in a Greenway map. And for the most part, these are those that you see here on your screen. These are not necessarily, I know it says this on the legend on the left, but these are not necessarily all places that would be considered for easements. I just want to throw that out there. They could be, but it doesn't mean that these are being all being identified as potential easements. That was just sort of a mislabel there. Just wanted to put that out there for the recording. So these are the parcels that have been submitted and have been edited down by planning and zoning staff. And so Karen and Linda and I looked at all of these, wanted to see if there are any major places that were missing, sort of think about how does this sort of checkerboard type look turn into a Greenway map. And we looked through some other ecological base layers, so data layers that show you where forest corridors exist throughout the city, watersheds. We looked at also public access, and there's been some new mapping efforts recently by the Department of Natural Resources and also by the Trust for Public Land that show equity for park access, and looked at places that don't have a lot of parks and if there were places that have been identified that may serve that purpose. So we went through a lot of things just to make sure, we really sort of looked at this from all angles. And I think we've got a pretty good base layer at this point. Next steps, I think for us, so one is I have received a few submissions via email that I will send over to city planning to make sure they get added to this map. And obviously we'll come back to you guys if there are like substantial additions or make big changes to what we're looking at here. I think then after that is done for the Annapolis Conservancy Board, probably for us, the main thing is to use it to identify places that might be good candidates for voluntary easements, and where we should kind of direct our efforts moving forward. Then, to help aid the city in moving more towards a greenway plan, which was discussed in the comprehensive plan update we just looked at, is how could we take what you see here and begin to turn it into something more like you see in a greenway map. And I'm going to show you, how do I do this? I'm going to show you, is it this? Let's see, hang on guys. This could be a rough ride. Okay, so can you guys see a map, a PDF?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so this is just an example that I pulled up really quickly off the website. At Anne Arundel County, this is their greenway map. So, showing where the greenway corridors exist in the county. So how do we go from what I just showed you, sort of that checkerboard of properties, to something that's a little more like this and other greenway plans that you see? And I think one thing is, I'm gonna jump back. Nope, don't want that. Here we go. Thank you guys. All right, so when we start to add in some of the other pieces here, I think this does start to become more like one of those fuller greenway maps. So if we start to add in existing conservation easements, we've got those in here. Then you look at city-owned properties, which are now popping up in orange. And then you look at some of the additional park and recreation facilities, which the ones that popped up just now are schoolyards with recreation facilities. And I'm actually going to pull up the layer. This was the original layer, the yellow, of places that were submitted. And some of these have come off, and I'm not entirely sure why some of them came off. So I'm going to check with planning and zoning. I think I know why. I think it's because they're already slated for development, or maybe are I'm not quite sure. But when we start to put all these different pieces together, you start to see a much more connected sort of system, a much more connected greenway. And then I'm going to throw on a layer that is called forest corridors. And this is something that was developed through what's called the Greater Baltimore Wilderness Coalition, that looked at connections of habitat across the greater Baltimore area, which in their planning included Annapolis. I'm putting on a lot of layers here. It's kind of hard to look at this when these are all different colors. But I'm doing this just to show, I think when we pull all these pieces together, you do start to see this more kind of connected system of greenway corridors across the city, and could become something like what I showed you that Anne Arundel County has. And so I think the next steps potentially for the comp plan, and this is something obviously we'll be talking about with city staff more, but is to get to this point where you have this sort of more connected layer as opposed to specific identified parcels that you would include in a comp plan. And beyond that, it's sort of to figure out within these greenway corridors, what are the needs to preserve the benefits that are there or to enhance them, right? And those ideas came up throughout those comp plan actions that we looked at. So I think they're very well included in the comp plan update strategies so far. Hopefully this is making some sense to you. Any questions? Linda, Karen, did I categorize? Did I relay the conversation that we had fairly well there? Did I miss anything, or?
No, I think that covered it, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. Awesome. All right. So next steps, I'll be checking in with the city, sharing with them those other items that were submitted by email. And I think probably continuing conversations with them on how to turn what we have into more of what you typically see in a greenway map that's included in something like a comp plan. And then from there, I just wanted to go through our updates really quickly and first off, give Jackie and or Racine the opportunity to share their good news about the Hawkins Cove grant that they received. And if you can, just kind of tell us sort of the timeline for moving ahead with that grant and where the Conservancy Board fits in there.
All right, since Racina's got the delay, I'll just fill in for her. So we received from the Chesapeake Bay Trust $65,000 for restoration work at Hawkins Cove. And what we did initially back in the winter was to do a series. We were limited to Zoom. We were prevented from doing in-person meetings. We did some public outreach and some surveys, and we had staff on the street in Eastport asking people about what do you want Hawkins Cove to look like? What kind of amenities do you want there? Well, we explained to them different options because people didn't always come up with their own ideas. Like, do you want us to restore the shoreline? Do you want wildlife habitat? Would you like recreation there? Would you like passive enjoyment? And the overall feedback we got was that people would like to see the shoreline be something more natural and ecologically friendly. They would like to see, it be more attractive, which interprets to removal of the ivy, get rid of the invasives, put natural plants there. They would like the walking trails improved, perhaps some picnic benches and just regular benches for just passive enjoyment. But they really wanted to see it left in a natural state, but be more usable, and also having boat as in kayaks, paddle boards, and a kayak or launch area there. So we came up with a very preliminary concept design to send to the trust. And part of the funding is to do additional community outreach, especially in the low income and disadvantaged neighborhoods, because those people aren't usually the ones who will come to a meeting. So now that COVID is lifted, restrictions have lifted, we can go into the community and have some events, especially down at the Cove, where people can see what the issues are and envision a different space, a community space, and what the trails could be. And we may have to do this in a series of grants because we only got 65,000. Now, the reason why the trust thinks for public outreach and concept design and construction of at least the living shoreline and removal of the eroding bulkhead there that we only needed $65,000 is because it's a fairly small area for a living shoreline. And because there's not a lot of wave action there, you don't have the rock involved that chews up a lot of the budget, the hardscaping.
Yeah.
So that's where we stand right now. I just today started, now I did the community outreach portion with the mayor's staff and did the grant myself because one person was supposed to help with it, ended up in the hospital and is going through treatment right now. But we just started planning our next step, our next community outreach step. And this project now becomes a project of the Department of Public Works because it's a restoration project. But the mayor's staff and city manager's office will still be involved with the community outreach portion of it and concept, and have some input into the concept design. So you may be seeing some, community outreach kind of announcements in the very near future in July and August regarding Hawkins Cove to get more community input on it.
Is there a way for us to get on a listserv about that, or what the word is I'm looking for?
Did you say get on the listserv for it?
Yeah, like when they're putting out announcements about.
Yeah, so we will definitely, when we did the initial community outreach, we made sure that we included Joanna and Bevan Buchheister and invited all the other members of both commissions. We're invited to participate in the several Zoom meetings that we did have, and that will happen again. So as a member of this board, you will already be on the list of invitees. Otherwise, it's a general outreach solicitation from the city. There'll probably be targeted outreach to certain communities around Hawkins Cove, the condo associations and HOAs and HACA properties that border it, as well as there was a lot of interest from Eastport Elementary School. And then because it's a public meeting, of course, it will be out to the general public as well.
Great. That sounds good. And as a reminder, I'm sure everybody remembers this, but this ties into our work to try to establish easements on that Hawkins Cove property that we've been maintaining for so long that the city owns, as well as on Truxton Park. I think when we initially had conversations with Maryland Environmental Trust about working with them to create an easement, and I think all realized at that point that it makes sense to go through this, complete the community visioning and the engagement efforts, figure out what their ideas are and what the concept plan is going to look like for Hawkins Cove before trying to enter into any kind of easement conversations to, and figure out what the language would be in an easement.
Yeah, and also we have to figure out how much of that property is actually on HACA property and what types of arrangements we have to make with them. There's some question about how much of that is actually owned by the city and what we could put an easement on. But definitely that's something, go through the process of improving it and making the trails better, we should definitely consider it for conservation easement. There is a resident that's expressed interest in donating a rather large sum of money to help with, things that are beyond the grant funding.
Oh, great.
And the trust knows that we can't do everything that may come out of the community charrettes and outreach that we do. So they know that, they expect you when they fund you for a concept design and initial construction that you'll come back for additional funding.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Okay.
Yeah. And there's also Spa Creek Conservancy did a regenerative stream conveyance system there in 2018, but it's not connected to the shoreline yet because the shoreline was a bulkhead. So, we don't know if we can make that channel connect with the money that we have. That would be something we'd be seeking additional funding for. And Spa Creek Conservancy also put in a rain garden or two on the other side of the cove that is not functioning as well as it could, and is also not connected to the shoreline. So there would be more funds needed for that.
So it'd be kind of good to keep tabs on at what point in the process do we want to start up conversations about easements again. And my other question, I guess, would be, do we need to wait for all this to move forward before having any conversations about doing an easement on the Truxton Park property?
No, I don't think so. But that's one where we'll have to have conversations with Archie Trader at Rec and Parks about, because the Parks and Recreation doesn't want easements on their ball fields or any of the areas where they plan to make improvements, of course, but they're open to other areas.
So maybe that's a future kind of to do on our list, is maybe set up a meeting with the Department of Parks and Rec and start that coordination. That's in the comp plan. Get that started. Right. Okay. All right. Any questions from anybody on this? Okay. I don't think, looking down the list of potential updates, I don't think I really have anything major that I know about. I mentioned to you, I checked in with Ashley about the MOU with the county, and it's still in the county's Parks and Rec department, and she sort of continues to nudge them kind of regularly on that. So we'll just sort of keep tabs there. These are the main updates that I have for you guys. Yeah, anything I'm leaving out? Any questions, comments, thoughts you guys want to add? Bye, Racine. Or do you have something to add, Racine?
Is it okay to speak? Oh, okay. I just wanted to let you know that I went on the Conservancy Board's website through the city, and it looks like that there are 2 vacancies on the board. I don't know if that's correct or not, but I just wanted to put it out there that, you do have the vacancies. And if you know of anyone, or if you have any suggestions that we might be able to follow up on, you can let Hillary know, or even keep me in the loop, and maybe I can do some follow up for you. But we have the vacancies that we want to get filled for your board.
Yeah, thank you, Racine. That's a great thing and a great reminder. So one piece of news there. So Karen Jennings does know someone who is potentially interested in joining the Annapolis Conservancy Board, and we've connected that individual with Hillary. But yeah, I'm so glad you said that, Racine, and I apologize for not including you in those emails. So we will definitely do that moving forward when we have a potential candidate, to make sure you're in the loop there, and I can sort of forward you those emails. So that's one potential person, but yes, we do have 2 vacancies. So obviously can continue to reach out to other folks, and I need to move that higher up on my to-do list to try and reach out to some different folks and see if there's some interest. So thank you. Any other?
I just wanted to mention one other thing on Hawkins Cove. I want to thank Karen Jennings for providing that trail loop for the Spa Cove loop that was put together some time ago. I included that in the grant proposal because the trust really loves that kind of stuff. And I said, you know, this Hawkins Cove portion and trail improvements that go across Primrose and over to Truxton Park and over to the other side of Eastport could be included in a future Spa Cove loop, as I called it. And they just ate that up. They thought that was a great idea, but that would require additional funding. So the idea was this would be a walking, biking, jogging loop that would go from downtown across the Spa Creek Bridge through Eastport and around through Hawkins Cove, you know, and connect again through Truxton Park and back to downtown. So one big loop, and have markers along the way that identify and describe restoration practices, important environmental features, and historical sites as well. And they thought that was great. So thank you, Karen, very much, and anybody else who had anything to do with that map.
That's great. I noticed that when we were looking at the Greenway map, that Joanna brought up a layer that she got from planning and zoning of potential trails, and it was on there. So somehow it got conveyed to planning and zoning, I guess, or whoever put the trail map together. So I was happy to see it there too. Yeah, I think it'd be really cool if we could get something like that done. It would be a really cool thing in the city, I think.
Yeah, I agree. Awesome. Nice work, Karen. And thank you for that point, Jackie. Anything else coming up for folks? All right. Well, if not, can I have a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
I'll second.
All right. So it was made by Linda, seconded by Karen there. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye.